So Ashley Young recently spoke about how it's now or never for Ruben Amorim. He said how the team needs patience, but Amorim needs a strong start as well. And it's true. Like it or not, we all know that this squad is so far away from competing seriously in any way, shape or form. However, if Amorim goes 4 games without a win at the start of the season, you can bet your bottom dollar that he will be donezo out here. And so my guy needs to cook a Michelin star meal for pre-season if he wants to, rightly or wrongly, keep his Manchester United job. Thus, whilst pre-season is realistically a nothing burger period of games, I genuinely think that this one is a little bit different. And that's because we know that Amorim is stubborn in his principles. It's his way or no way. I reckon bro would rather forfeit the game than turn up using tactics that aren't his own. And that's what makes this interesting. One of the main reasons he wanted to wait until this summer to originally join the club was for a pre-season, to instill his philosophy upon the players. He spoke multiple times about how he basically had 0 training ground time with his players last season. And any time he did have to maybe train was spent doing interviews telling us how little time he does have to train. He couldn't win. But now he's got a few weeks of nothing but training time. And like I said, for good or for bad, Amorim is stubborn in his principles. So what we see in pre-season should largely be what we get. It won't be like a Ten Hag scenario where, if my memory serves me correctly, he played Sancho as a false 9 at one point, played well, and then we just never saw that again. And so these are 5 things that I think we should all be keeping an eye on going into these next couple of weeks. The first of which being Kobbie Mainoo. I don't think a single Man United fan wants this kid sold. Right? Ever since his breakthrough, he's looked like the future of our team and possibly even a potential captain one day. But last season, something was off. Now, don't get me wrong, Mainoo still showed flashes of brilliance, those signature little turns that he does, the calmness under pressure, the ability to take on a man. But I think it's safe to say that under Amorim, it was the first time his future at the club felt a little uncertain, lost maybe. I remember getting excited seeing Amorim work with him in his first ever training session when he first joined, thinking that this was the start of a match made in heaven, but it's not been that. Now, it of course doesn't help that Mainoo had an injury, but the biggest issue for Mainoo hasn't really been the playing time per se, but the playing style. At times, we saw him as part of the midfield too. Then he was pushed forward into one of the number 10s, which looked like maybe that's what he needed. Use his skill set to turn him into our very own Jamal Musiala type profile. But then he was even used as a false 9. Yes, Kobbie Mainoo led the line for us last season. I know Højlunder's cheeks, but you couldn't make it up really, could you? And that's the thing. Amorim played him in practically every role possible, and none of them truly stuck. Yet despite the ups and downs, when it mattered, Mainoo stepped up. And that's because whilst form is temporary, class is permanent, and Mainoo has bags of class. Thus, it is Amorim's job to get the best out of him. It's all well and good wanting players that suit your system, but there comes a time where you also have to coach the players you have. And well, it was reported in fairness a while ago that the goal for the summer is to develop Mainoo's fitness and athleticism so that he can fully handle the demands of Amorim's system and become an important piece of the midfield puzzle moving forward. And you can see it already. He is much leaner now. I do think he was carrying too much weight last season, not in like a fat way, but just I think perhaps he bulked up a little bit too much. But on the topic of fitness, that's another thing to look out for this pre-season. How are our players moving? Do they play as fit as they now look? Because if they do, that alone will genuinely be enough to win us a few extra points next season. And trust me, we're going to need all the ones we can get. Nonetheless, this pre-season is massive for Mainoo. Where will Amorim use him? Where is his future? Let's see it. Because if we can find a way to properly fit Mainoo into the system, we will have saved ourselves so much money. Money we don't really have. And not to sound like the captain of Sir Jim Ratcliffe's penny pinching Reds here, but every penny we save in one position should, hopefully, be freed up for another. Bringing me onto point number 2. transfers. I'm going to keep this as short as I can because, quite frankly, who wants to spend all day talking about Bryan Mbeumo like we've not spent the last 40 days talking about that already, doing absolutely nothing? But it is time we started seeing movement in the market with a touch more urgency, please. I get that, realistically, we need to sell in order to buy. But was there not a plan in place for this? What happened to Omar Barada's plan that we're going to execute this summer? It should have been obvious that clubs were going to try and fleece us for all it's worth. The sales were always going to be a big worry, and shock horror, they are. Now, don't get me wrong, coming into the summer, we all had this dream of getting rid of Sancho, Rashford, Garnacho, Antony, Casemiro, Shaw, Malacia, Højlund, Onana. The list, honestly, just goes on and on and on. But in reality, most of those are staying. Even the likes of Antony, one of the only informed players that we employ at this club, we are struggling to sell. Even after the club that he performed for, that's been working for him, sold players in order to fund the move, they still want him on loan. Rashford as well. Barcelona agreed a deal worth 50-odd million for Williams, ended up being rejected, and now we're out here talking about Rashford on loan? Nah. Pay up. We know you've got the money. You agreed 50 million for Williams. What do you mean? Oh, can we just loan Rashford actually? No, pay the fucking 40 million, bro. In fact, everybody pay up. And in the case of Jadon Sancho, take a pay cut. I beg, please. Remember when it was all about freedom for him and being able to play his football away from the toxicity of Ten Hag and Manchester United? Yeah, where's that freedom now, Sancho? Freedom actually means money, does it? Oh, right. Well, it makes more sense now. And the reason this is truly a shame is because at Sporting, Amorim's first summer saw him oversee the exit of up to 25 players. I don't even know if we have 25 first-team players to begin with. Now, some were contract expiries like we've had with Evans and Eriksen, etc. But if Ineos looked at how Amorim managed to turn Sporting from this failure to back at the top winning titles, and you want him to replicate that, it's your job as the board to replicate the environment that led to that, and so far, you haven't even come close to that. Because so far, the only money we've made this summer has come from other teams selling players that we used to have, and so we get a little bit of a trickle down. So, my message to you, Ineos, get off your asses and start to at least pretend to act like you've just come 15th and are trying to do something about it, please? Now, let's try be a little bit more positive again, shall we? I know it's hard, but another thing I want to keep an eye on this season is Dorgu and Cunha, specifically how they work together. Dorgu came under a lot of flack last season, and in some cases, yeah, sure, he was far from incredible, but other than Bruno, who was for us? However, it didn't help that the player he would be predominantly linking up with was Alejandro Hamster Wheel for a Brain Garnacho. Seriously, one of the things that harmed Dorgu the most last season was the fact that he was largely being ignored. We've seen in the preseason training clips that the club have been posting that Dorgu and Amad overlaps into a cutback are being practiced. And so they should. A good cutback into the box is one of the most effective passes you can make on the pitch. But last season, if Dorgu ever did an overlap into space where he could then receive the ball and perform said cutback, Garnacho would just cut in and shoot aimlessly. Probably take out a small child in the process. It was beyond ridiculous. But he's gone now. Well, as we said, unfortunately not like fully gone, but his place in the starting 11 well and truly is. And so I will be interested to see how Dorgu links up with Cunha, who is a far more intelligent footballer. What's more is that he struck up a fantastic partnership with Aït-Nouri on that left-hand side at Wolves. And whilst I'm not saying that Patrick Dorgu is on Aït-Nouri's level, because I don't think he is. I am and have been for years a huge Aït-Nouri fan, but the Dane should see a big improvement thanks to the personnel around him also improving. But he's not the only left wing back we should be keeping an eye on now, as the club have finally been able to welcome Diego León. Now, I understand that this kid is, well, exactly that. He's a kid. And of course, he's been saying all the right things about how he's gonna fight for his position, and I don't blame him. I reckon me or you would probably have a decent chance of getting a game at United at the minute if we just locked in a little. But realistically, what do you do with him? Personally, I would at least consider keeping Diego León until January. And the reason for this is I think it's a bit unfair. You don't just uproot a 17-year-old, 18-year-old from South America, drop him in Manchester away from his family, and then immediately ship him off to another club where he's living alone, playing once every 3 weeks, getting screamed at by a coach who doesn't speak his language. At that point, it's not even development for him, it's just like potential trauma for the kid. Therefore, I think you let him settle. Let him learn the language, let him understand the club culture, the city, the weather, and then we can decide if he needs a loan or if he can stay. Because if we want to get the long-term success from the kid, as much as we all love our shiny new toys, and trust me, at United we do, we need to develop him off the pitch before we develop him on it. But that's also where it gets a little bit tricky, because we already have Harry Amass. He's already here. He's already embedded into the club, already showing maturity beyond his years, and whilst Diego León is clearly a special talent, Amass is further down the pipeline of progression. I mean, he grew up with us. He's actually played first-team football with us at a decent level as well. But here's the honest truth. Only one of them are realistically staying at the club this year. With no European football, there simply isn't enough games to develop them both. Neither of them will be happy sitting on the bench every week. They will both want and need game time. And we've not even spoken about the elephant in the room here, probably because he's rarely ever in the room, but Luke Shaw. He, when fit, is good. And whilst he's capable of playing as that left centre-back, I would rather develop Yoro there over him now, and when Martinez is also fit, he also clears Shaw. And so that's more left wing-back competition for these kids. As a result, this pre-season, if we're being real between these two, it is trial by fire. Amass versus León. One stays, one goes. And I look forward to watching them both battle it out on tour. Talking of battles, two players I hoped wouldn't be battling it out for game time this year are Onana and Bayindir. Well, the good news is that we don't have to worry about Onana, as he's now injured and will miss the entire tour. The bad news is, who on earth do we play there on tour? The obvious answer is, of course, Bayindir. And realistically, that's probably what's going to happen. But let's not rewrite history here. Bayindir does not have any form of a future at this club whatsoever, and he shouldn't anyway. So what now? Do you throw in a keeper that you don't trust, that doesn't have a future here in what we've already established so far is a key period in Ruben Amorim's Manchester United career? Or do you roll the dice and sign a new goalkeeper? Perhaps John Victor from Botafogo? Because the club are clearly a fan of him. Now, I can't say I've seen much of him because I'd be lying. If you guys do want a full scout report made on him though, let me know. I'm happy to do so. He wouldn't be my first choice, regardless. My first choice has a fat 0% chance of ever happening, as it would be Santos from Frankfurt. But I've said it before, and I'll say it again. If United really do like John Victor, and they've been monitoring him, then get a move on. The only other option is throw Vitek in there. Honestly, and I mean this with all my heart, it can't be much worse. Because unless something changes in the goalkeeper position, you can bring in Cunha, Mbemo, fucking Erling Haaland for all I care. It doesn't matter who's scoring, because we'll be conceding for fun. Now, if you enjoyed this video, it would mean the world to me if you could leave a like, subscribe, and ding that notification bell if you're not already. And whilst you're here, check out this video on your screen right now where I scouted who I think could be a really good choice for that midfield role under Ruben Amorim.